Today's episode is brought to you by the United States Postal Service. O Master of my life, I beseech you, please grant me a few minutes so that I might talk with my friends and not have to work anymore. Anyway, hope everybody's doing alright. Yes, I know it's been 2 weeks since I uploaded one of these. Actually, it's been 2 weeks as I'm sitting here talking. It'll probably be longer than that by the time I actually get this up on YouTube. Just wanted to do a quick review. We're just going to go from left to right. I'm going to brief you on the situation. You've seen quite a lot of action happening already. One thing that you would not have seen, though, is over here by Casa Finella and Casa Raposa. My artillery against the enemy positions has ended. I've actually done an adjust fire on my 120mm mortars over here by Casa d'Antonio. And my artillery has ended. However, the actual artillery coming in has not finished because I'm fairly certain Bletchley Geek had called in artillery on my infantry positions behind this stone wall here. So, as you can see, I have been conducting a withdrawal of my intact teams off of the wall. I did take a couple of casualties from the artillery itself, but for the most part, everybody made it back okay, and we're going to be reshuffling the defense over here at Casa Raposa, and eventually I'm going to strip out a few intact squads and move them away from the position, and we're going to do some sneaky maneuvers with them. But that'll be coming up later. You also saw the beginning of my trade bullets to avoid casualties tactic, and that involved area fire with heavy machine guns against the leading edges of Bletchley Geeks advanced down this bushline path over here. Once this leading team over here seemed to have been destroyed, I ceased fire with my heavy machine gun, and now my infantry teams over here are still keeping up just a target light kind of area target order. I don't want them to use all their ammunition, even though I do have a ready supply of it back here in the supply truck. Where is the truck driver? Oh, he's in the truck. Yeah, later on I put the driver back in the truck. I don't know. Whatever. That doesn't matter. One other thing you would have seen, Bletchley Geek moved several infantry squads up here to the barbed wire over here. I don't know if he was trying to send a breach team through this wire and gain access to the victory location from this side of the building, but I did manage to get this machine gun team back up into this house upstairs, where they fired down on several infantry contacts down here, causing a few casualties, and then they immediately became pinned down by return fire coming from across the gully from over here, and they exited the building out front, ran right out into my adjusted mortar barrage, and took a casualty right here in front of this building. They then came back under control, surprisingly. Even though they're -1 leadership, there's nothing wrong with their morale. So I managed to get them to use the take cover command, and that take cover command put them right inside the house. And they're regrouping right here. I'm going to move them up to the second floor, looking in this direction, so we can continue to interdict this approach to the victory location. For a victory location that I had never actually intended to fight over, so far, the fighting is actually going rather well, surprisingly. And here is Austerman, the Section HQ. He once again inserted a few bullets into some enemies, and then he exited the house along with the machine gun team, came back over here to this little shack. My intention is, given the fact he's only got 20 bullets left for his MP40, my intention is to medic up these two guys, and hopefully he can recover a Kar 98 and some ammunition so he has a second weapon to use, because sometimes when you're buddy aiding your own teammates, if your guy's really low on ammo, he will pick up a different weapon and use it. So hopefully Austerman can stay in the fight. Otherwise, he's just going to have to keep borrowing ammunition off of the heavy machine gun team, but they're running low on 9mm ammo too, and there's really no way I can resupply. One other thing you will have noticed is these two teams right here. I kind of got it in my head. This is just a temporary thing. I'm going to change my mind on this rather shortly. But I kind of got it in my head to use the suppressing fire from my heavy machine gun teams over here that are up against the enemy teams on the wire and up against the enemy teams across the gully, I thought now is a pretty good time to actually try to push a couple of teams down this bush line path, maybe cut the corner over here, and then try to get into the victory location from here. Despite the fact that I never actually intended to fight for this spot, the fact that I'm still holding it has kind of made me think about putting a few more guys in there, maybe trying to relieve the position, leaving these guys in here and getting these machine gun section guys out of there, actually, and pulling them back. It's not going to go that easily, and this little aborted move will basically be called back shortly, but it's just something that I thought of. It will, later on in the battle, I will eventually get some more guys up in here, but we'll cover that later. One thing to note with my two heavy machine guns here, first of all, this lone survivor of the B team of the machine gun section that was over here at Casa d'Antonio, not only did he survive the destruction of his team and manage to get through all the enemy fire back to the stone wall, but now he's got loads of ammunition, and despite the fact that his status is permanently broken, he's more than capable of just putting down area fire at distance. So having a single guy with an MG42 is pretty handy to have around. So just remember, if your machine gun teams are really beaten up, that doesn't mean as long as he has the gun, you can still make use of him. And of course, he's got this other team here to help him out. I wish the team leader wouldn't fire off his MP40 quite so much, but there's nothing I can do about that. The 9mm ammo's draining away, and in fact, the status of 9mm ammunition in my teams is actually going to have a shaping effect on this battle, but we'll come to that later. One thing to note is when I do... one thing you might want to consider, if you're using your heavy machine guns, here's a little tactical musing for you. When you're using heavy machine guns to suppress a position, give a target briefly command. Instead of a target light, give a target briefly. Go for 30 seconds if you can't see the enemy. And the idea is that if you fire on that position for 30 seconds, you might just suppress the enemy enough you might just suppress the enemy enough, or at least pin them down enough, that it forces them to stand up and try to take cover. And if you get them to get into that, that point where it's like, we're getting shot at a lot, we need to take cover, your target briefly command runs out after 30 seconds. So instead of conducting area fire, what happens is your machine gunners the area target will cancel, and your machine gunners will be free to engage and directly shoot at any enemy troops that manage to pop up after you've been firing at them for a short time. And this basically what I did most of the time. I do have, before I just showed that off, I did have this guy on a target light command, but that's because I was fairly certain Bletchley Geek was bringing up a breach team to try to cut this wire, and I did not want him to, so I was just going to cover this obstacle with fire constantly for several turns. And you'll see that as I go through more of the action replay. But this guy right here, while these guys were on a target light over here, this guy did not have a target command, but he was facing in that direction, and that was for that very purpose. While these guys are firing over here, causing suppression and maybe routing a team or two, this guy sitting behind the wall right next to them has approximately the same line of sight to the position, and if any of Bletchley Geek's guys got up and turned to run away or to try to get back into cover, the second machine gun is free to just fire on targets of opportunity as he chooses. And the same thing is happening over here. I do have a B team of an infantry squad with a light machine gun firing into these trees over here, and then an infantry team right next to them, while they are calling in an artillery strike. They're not on a cover arc, and they're not in hiding, they're just sitting here waiting to fire on anybody that they see. And that's something that I do all the way down the line. In fact, I did the same thing over here, although we kind of ran out of targets to shoot at. But this LMG section was firing on an area target order, while the section armed with submachine guns was maneuvering off to the side, and they were free to engage any targets that managed to pop up or get flushed out of their position. So that's one thing to think about. Also, this heavy machine gun was involved in some of the fighting over here. He took one casualty from a 2-inch mortar, but I managed to get him out of the position, and we'll medic that guy up later. But at this point in the battle, so far, we've seen a company-sized plus attack against Casafanella, which we managed to stop and then hit with some artillery. I'm not exactly sure how many casualties my artillery did. I'm under no illusions like, oh, I probably killed all his guys. No, but I think he took significant casualties. Because as I thought, he was beginning to mass for an attack to push forward up the slope, and then as he was massing for the attack, my artillery landed on him. But the fact that the fighting around Casa d'Antonio erupted shortly afterwards leads me to believe that I'm only looking at about half Bletchley Geek's force. So wherever the rest of his force is, we don't really know, but at this point in the battle, I'm thinking, I've stopped one attack, dealt it significant damage. If I can successfully stop this attack, because at this point I'm still not entirely sure, has his attack failed? I know he sent what was probably one platoon down this grassy path over here to the left, right? He has maybe another platoon that came through the woods, ran into my landmines, but they're probably busy marking those mines. He has another platoon that came across the gully over here, so this looks like another company over here, just in a big horseshoe fashion. So far, I'm absolutely certain I have not dealt enough damage to it to render it combat ineffective, so this is still the major point of threat here. But what's starting to kind of grow in the back of my mind is the idea that if I can deal significant amount of damage to Bletchley Geek's force, I can then try to launch a counterattack. And the point at which I launch that counterattack, I think, is going to be the next major feature of this AAR. We're going to continue covering the fight at Casa d'Antonio, because this engagement over here is actually going to drag on for quite a while. It's basically just a big skirmishing kind of matchup. There's not going to be any major assaults or anything, because honestly, I don't want to spend the resources and the time to do that. Mostly what I'm trying to do is just leverage enough firepower against Bletchley Geek over here, just to cause casualties and kill some of his men and just kind of win by attrition for a while. I mean, as I say, you know, you trade bullets to avoid casualties, or at the very least, you expend your ammunition to inflict casualties on the enemy and hopefully avoid them from yourself. And so far, that's working pretty good. I've only taken a few casualties. We've had one guy, you know, we had two guys from here, two guys from here, and a little bit of this machine gun team over here. We had 5 guys from here, and that's it. And so far, I've probably dealt at least double that amount of casualties to Bletchley Geek's force over here. And as my 120mm mortars and my 81mm mortars get retargeted onto this position, once again, I'm using the target reference point. Honestly, if I was, you know, if I had thought a little more about this, what I would have done, instead of putting the target reference point in the center of the objective, I would have just put it right here on the edge, on the enemy edge in the center of it. That would have allowed me to cover more of this area in front of the objective. But so far, just using the absolute edge of the target reference point and making sure that at least one point of my fire call touches the target reference point's area is allowing me to use them to pretty good effect so far, regardless of the fact that they're not exactly in optimal positions. But so far, what's going to be coming up next, there's going to be more skirmishing around Casa d'Antonio. The situation out here to the right in this orchard will develop a little bit more, and we're also going to see some troop shuffling and some redeployments around Casa Riposa, as Bletchley Geek is calling in artillery fire on this area. Eventually, he's going to it'll start to get a little heavier, and the question is he going to launch an attack on Casa Riposa? Like, is this artillery barrage intended to keep me in place and away from him, or is it intended to suppress me or drive me back and allow him to launch an attack? But we're not going to know that until much later. But just wanted to check in and hopefully get this completed. I know my uploading schedule has been a bit off lately, and I can only apologize for that, because work is keeping me very busy, and I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to be able to make another one of these. But until then, I hope y'all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you when I see you. Okay, bye.